Well, I'm delighted my newsettes are here to discuss the news with me this morning. I've got Clare Muldoon and Andy Williams. Great to have you in the studio. Very Merry Christmas to you. Although a very sad Christmas, of course, in Germany. At least 2 people are dead, possibly death toll as high as 4, but that's unconfirmed. Over 70 injured in Magdeburg. Very confusing messages coming out of this, Andy, in terms of the motivations of the alleged perpetrator.
Yeah, I think it's one of those scenarios where we're kind of 12 hours on from the incident or just over, and it's too early to have a complete picture of who this person was, what his motivations were, and why this really, really sad event happened. I know there's sort of a lot of speculation out there. Seems that this person is a Saudi national, but was in Germany for the best part of 20 years. And so actually, my immediate takeaway, beyond the fact that it's a really horrific incident and extremely sad, particularly at this time of year, is let's not allow people to weaponise this in a political way, which I think is inevitably what we're going to see, particularly given the rise of the AfD in Germany.
But we are in a situation where it's a Christmas market. I mean, you couldn't get much more straightforwardly Western and Christian than that.
Right. I expect that that's part of the motivation. I expect part of it is purely that it was very, very busy. But I'm really concerned about the idea that what's effectively a neo-Nazi party in Germany, in the AfD, are going to use this to build on the progress they've made over the last few years in terms of their popularity.
Well, in some of his tweets, he expressed support for the AfD as well, or apparently expressed support. And this is the
and for Tommy Robinson as well.
And this is the point, because
problem with this. And I just wish everyone would just stop commentating on it, stop giving their 2 tuppence worth in, because we are no further forward as to the reason why this has actually happened. And we can sit here, we can prevaricate, we can say Christmas, as you know, I'm a Christian
very
Catholic,
observant
very
Christian,
observant Christian. And this is absolutely awful. The timing is rubbish. Where he did it was awful. And traditionally, German Christmas markets have been the stalwart of the Christmas market.
It was the 8th anniversary yesterday of a previous attack. Was by an Islamist.
And also, in this country, we have had our security alerted to the Christmas markets. So I think there's things that haven't been reported. I think there's things that are going on that we are not privy to. And I don't think it's helpful, therefore, to comment any further on it, to stoke whatever fire. The facts remain. Innocent people have lost their lives at a very emotional time for a lot of people. That's my takeaway.
Thank you to Jane, who's been in touch this morning. Peter, good to hear from Ralph, talking facts and seeing what many of your audience think as well. John in Spain's been in touch on the subject of people receiving more benefits than the tax they pay. I hope pensioners who have paid in to receive that pension are not included, as having paid for it is not a benefit, says John. On Starmer's biggest regret, we're asking you this morning what you think his biggest regret should be. He's saying that he hasn't had any regrets. We'll ask Andy and Claire in a second. Hi Peter, great show. Starmer's biggest regret, saying Labour are a party of integrity and readiness, says Kev in Poole. And Christmas wishes to me and to Jack and all your audience from Shane in Sydney. Appreciate that as well. Maybe I could ask you actually just briefly what you think Starmer's greatest regret should be, or has he got absolutely everything right, Claire?
He's a robot, he's unemotional, he's narcissistic. How can he possibly even know what a regret is?
And enough about Andy, what about Keir Starmer? I'm joking.
I'm not a robot.
No, you're not. You're narcissistic, though. I'm joking, says somebody.
Who switched you on this morning, then?
Oh, no.
Oh, someone comes round every morning to plug me in.
We love you, Andy. What do you think Starmer's biggest regret should be? Should he have any?
Of course he should. I mean, it's nobody, even the most enthusiastic Labour supporter can't seriously, credibly sit there and go, everything's been brilliant, it's been perfect, we're smashing it out the park. Employee national insurance, I think, is the big one. I think that is actually the decision. While I understand that there was a need to raise a lot of money quickly as a kind of sticking plaster for the NHS and other public services, raising employer national insurance, we're already seeing that businesses are making decisions not to hire, in some cases to cut jobs, and that will feed through to people. You know, the argument was it's a tax on business, not on individuals. Well, it ultimately is a tax on individuals, and I think that will cause sort of short to medium term damage to the economy, and I think that's the biggest decision they've got wrong.
Just to say the latest news is that the number of people killed in the Magdeburg Christmas market attack has risen from 2 to 4. That's German media confirming that 4 people have died. We know that the number injured is more than 200. That has risen from the original figure of 68, and 41 people have been seriously injured. That's up as well, and perhaps that will increase. We'll bring you right up to date with everything that is happening there right throughout the programme between now and 12:30. We'll also continue our discussion with Claire and with Andy after the break. Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Jason in the Lake District. He says, Andy talks about the threat of the AFD. How about the threat that the wet left-leaning governments of the last 20 years across Europe who have encouraged the third world to move into it? People like Andy fail to acknowledge the blindingly obvious. We also have, I'll put that to Andy in a second, we also have someone who's been in touch on Twitter. Let me just find it here for a second, who's also been in touch, who talking about what Andy says. What an utter disgrace Andy Williams is. He just contradicts himself by immediately politically weaponising this German market tragedy after having said nobody should weaponise this event. Extraordinary lack of self-awareness. Andy?
No, I wasn't weaponising it at all. I was merely making the point that certain groups and parties and people with an agenda shouldn't use this for that reason. I mean, we haven't had left-leaning governments across Europe over the last 20 years. Germany was governed by the CDU, which is a right-wing party. The UK is being governed by the Tories, which is a centre-right party. So I don't think that's true either. I just think we need to be really, as Claire said, it's way too early to make any comment on the motivation or the reasons behind this. We don't know. We can't get inside this person's head.
Well, perhaps Ranga, who is in, who has contacted me on Twitter, has some interesting thoughts on this. Perhaps you'd agree with this person. It doesn't matter what colour he is, it doesn't matter what race he is, it doesn't matter what religion he is. He purposefully drove a car at innocent shoppers in a country that welcomed him in. That's all the facts that are needed. He is a terrorist. Billy Bunster has been in touch to say Ralph Schulhammer saying how it is, and good to see the Prime Minister of Germany there already. The British Prime Minister would be somewhere not in GB. People talking about never hear Keir, as he's sometimes known. Another texter says, Clare Muldoon, if I could give her a huge Christmas hug for just being my favourite guest. That person says, which is nice. Michelle says, I'm a little confused. If this man was anti-Muslim, why was he attacking a Christian market, Christmas market? I'm not sure that washes with me, but we'll see. I don't believe any mainstream media or government anymore. We've been lied to too often. That is the developing news, that the number of people killed in Magdeburg Christmas market has risen from 2 to 4, according to German media. The number of people injured has risen to more than 200, and of those, 41 have been seriously injured. Andy, do you have a final thought on this?
Just very quickly, yeah. And I agree with your listener who said that it doesn't matter what race, nationality, whatever this person is. The point is, it's a horrific act. But if it is somebody who has been living in Germany for 18 years, who is a doctor, who is potentially a psychiatrist, a highly qualified, presumably intelligent individual, I genuinely don't know, what do you do from a policy standpoint to stop things like that happening? How do you tackle that?
Claire, final thought on this?
I don't think you can. And if we go on to talk about the sheriff, that poor girl who was murdered by her parents, I don't think you can prevent that from happening either. And I've always said, all the mishaps, all the atrocities that happened in the Baby P case, and this case as well, you cannot legislate against evil.
No.
And that, at the end of the day, is what it is. It's not a mental health condition. It's not a fundamentalist terrorist act. It could be, but I think it's inherently cuts through everything else. Evil.
Completely agree.
Just as a final thought on this, and then I want to ask the others about the Sarah Sharif aspect as well. The friend who sent me the photo of the sign that we've been looking at of the Frankfurt market, she's been in touch to say that the Frankfurt market wasn't just attended by white European people of a Christian background. There were many immigrant, clearly Muslim families queuing for food. She says, she just messaged me this, she's listening to the programme, buying candied almonds, riding carousel, immigrants integrating and enjoying centuries-old European customs and entertainment. We don't know the ethnicity of origin of those killed and injured last night, but everyone visiting the market was equally vulnerable. Terrorists don't care about who they murder, just as the IRA and other Irish Republican terror groups killed many innocent Catholics in bomb attacks on town centres, shops and entertainment venues. We're going to continue to talk about this, but I want to talk about another story now, which is that the judge in the Sarah Sharif case, this is just absolutely a horrendous attack on free speech, in my opinion. This is a very interesting story that the judge says the press cannot be trusted to be fair. He has imposed an anonymity order. This is on you remember the Sarah Sharif case, the little girl who was essentially beaten to death, tortured to death by her father and stepmother. Absolutely horrendous. And an extraordinary sort of broadside, Mr. Justice Williams says he imposed an anonymity order to prevent, as he puts it, a virtual lynch mob because he did not believe the media could be trusted to report matters in a fair, accurate and responsible way. This is the High Court judge controversially blocking the identification of professionals in the Sarah Sharif case. This harks back, I think, I'll get the opinions of Clare and Andy in a second, but this harks back, I think, to what happened to Sharon Shoesmith, who was the head of Children's Services, I think, in Haringey Council, when the baby P was murdered. There was his mother was jailed, and Sharon Shoesmith was sacked by Ed Balls. And what you can say what you like about Ed Balls, he did that, and that was a good act. She got compensation for doing so. I 100% think if you're the head of Children's Services, you should at least be considering your position, if not resigning, if not facing charges, if not facing criminal charges in regard to this. What do you think of this judge, Clare?
Right, so there's a lot actually to unpack here, and whilst I take your view, your name is on the door and it's your show, I don't necessarily agree with you on this point, and I'll tell you why. The judge, I don't think, should have said, I think the reasoning behind what he said and what his actions have concluded is that we don't want the situation in Batley, the headmaster, having to go into hiding. That's not good. We don't want anyone to be vilified by the court of public opinion. Look what happened in the riots, right? Britain is like a tinderbox at the moment. People are very, very, they're feeling unsafe, they're feeling untrustworthy of politicians. They're also feeling quite vulnerable. And I think he's quite right not to say that he doesn't trust the mainstream media with the facts. Whilst a big part of me thinks that's a slap in the face to the word of truth and to seek the truth and to get a way out, the other part of me then thinks, well, by not releasing these names, we are not going to promote a lynch mob. People will have safety in their homes, and we have to trust in the system that, as you quite rightly said, Peter, that heads should roll. Things obviously were overlooked, but I don't think it's in the public interest for us to know the names of those professional individuals that allowed, maybe not directly, but they actually allowed this to happen because there were things that were missed. Okay,
Clare, I fundamentally and wholeheartedly disagree with you because of one of the points that you've made, which is what you say, we've got to trust in the system. Yeah. The system got us to this point. The system was meant to work for Sarah Sharif. It didn't work. And now there has to be accountability. And what we've seen time and time and time again is that there's an inquiry. Lessons will be learned and people aren't held to account. Now, if they don't want to put the names in the public domain, maybe I can live with that. But I'd like them to be in the public domain, but what I would like is a guarantee, and I just don't think we can trust the system in this regard.
You can't guarantee that anything like this will not happen again.
Well, I know, but at least if people saw those people losing their jobs, at least if they saw public accountability, transparency, sunlight is the greatest disinfectant.
No, it's not, because it's the pressure that these institutions are under. They've got loads of transient staff coming in, coming out. You look at children now, if they say to a teacher, oh, my mum hit me or something like that, that parent is now pulled in. Yeah. Okay? This child was lost in the system. This child was lost.
There were 15 occasions on which something could have been done. This wasn't just my mum slapped me. This was a child who had a broken back.
I didn't think for 1 minute that child came in and reported anything, because I wouldn't have thought she would have even had the ability to formulate the atrocity and the evilness that actually happened to her.
Andy, what do you think?
I broadly agree with Clare. I do think it's really complicated. But the judge's point about a virtual lynch mob, you know, in our media ecosystem now, when the mainstream media reports a story, it will be reported from a variety of different angles, and then that is funneled into social media. And that, I think, is where, I think you said the word tinderbox, Clare, funneled into social media, where the facts get distorted and people start whipping things up. And we saw it with...
But the facts are very clear. The facts are very clear in this. I mean, on the face of it, okay, with the facts that are in the public domain already on Sarah Sharif, I think it is completely disgraceful that the head of Children's Services and the head of the council that were responsible for this have not resigned. That's really straightforward.
They should.
I agree with that.
But they won't.
But we don't need to... Well, because we don't know their names.
Well, that's part of it. That is part of it.
Peter.
Public demand. If you say to people, politicians know their names, then we talk about it.
There was a petition to get rid of Keir Starmer.
Yeah, but that's different. You know, he's democratically elected Prime Minister and he hasn't been involved in this. I'll come back to you in a second, Claire. Andy.
No, I do think they should resign, but I agree with Claire. I don't think it would make a difference if we knew what their names were, or the fact that we don't. And I do think there is kind of a safety aspect, because the public, elements of the public, can't be trusted not to take matters into their own hands. We saw that with the riots. I don't mean the public at large as a whole. I think the vast majority of people are good, law-abiding citizens, but we know for a fact there are elements of the public who are out there looking for an excuse to have a fight, basically.
You could, in theory, make this argument about lots of things, couldn't you? You could say that anonymity should be granted in lots of different ways to people accused of crimes, for example.
Well, I think for certain crimes it should be.
What about the argument that once you hear that someone is a perpetrator of a crime, perhaps other victims come forward? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean
that's happened in many cases in regard to sex offenders.
But this is why we have judges, right? And let's not start to go down this route that America has gone down, where every single public official is elected and all judges are elected.
No, I don't want that
and it gets politicised.
Yeah.
So, and my point being that judges are there to make decisions on a case-by-case basis on the basis of the facts, and I think we should trust them to do their jobs.
Judges are also limited in sentencing by their sentencing guidelines. Correct. And I think we need a complete and utter overhaul on those. And whilst I think that it's really good to have transparency in the courts, because sometimes we think that we're being fed a lie, or we're not getting the whole truth when it comes down to courts, and a lot of people don't understand the sentencing and the parameters and the limitations of threshold that judges have. I think we need better understanding of that. But I think the sentencing guidelines in this country are bordering on becoming a joke, and I think the judges really ought to have to look at the whole panorama, look at the whole vista, because sometimes, actually, judges are human. Did you know that? And they can actually make mistakes.
Absolutely correct. We can certainly agree on that anyway, Claire. Claire and Andy will continue to be with me after the break. Let me know your thoughts as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're also asking today, what do you think Keir Starmer should regret? What do you think his biggest regret should be? He says he has no regret. Je ne regrette rien. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, we have a wonderful couple of people in the studio today talking about all the different news events. We have Clare Muldoon. The reason we have Claire is because she speaks a lot of common sense, even if we disagree agreeably, as we did in the last section. And Andy speaks a lot of common sense as well, but he's here mainly because...
It's the most wonderful
No, you didn't.
I love that.
Andy Williams is here because... He is here because... He is here because...
It's the
You should see the royalties that are flooding into the bank account. Fantastic.
Yeah, sorry, Andy. We saw an opportunity to troll you, and we just thought we would.
Very enjoyable.
Yes,
Very enjoyable.
yes. He says through gritted teeth. He says through gritted teeth. Yes, one person who's got a big smile on his face is Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, off to America. I mean, this story broke on Thursday, but people still want to talk about it. Yeah. He is off to be the UK's ambassador to America. Andy, your thoughts on this?
I think overall, I think it's a pretty good appointment, because he clearly, he has extensive trade experience. He's a EU Trade Commissioner. He obviously is an intensely political person, and I think that experience of decades and decades at the top of British politics, or in and around the top of British politics, will be very handy in navigating a really challenging political time for the UK-US relationship. But obviously, and I think this is where we throw to Claire, he is a controversial figure.
Claire!
The Dark Prince.
Yeah.
The Prince of Darkness.
I read that book. I mean, I was no fan of the Blairite governance at all. I mean, it just was smacked of conservatism moreover than anything. And for him to have been the instructor, the conductor of all of that, I just don't trust him at all. And whilst people might say, but you would support Trump, and Trump equally could be described as being as odious, in my view, as Mandelson. But at least Trump, I think, is more of a disruptor. Mandelson, for me, gives me the vibe of a creep, someone who just takes it all in, sizes you all up, and then goes and does something quite different from what he's actually said he's going to do. I don't trust him.
He also basically called Donald Trump a racist, although David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, said he was a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. I'm talking about Donald Trump, obviously,
Trump.
not
Lord Mandelson.
Not Lord Mandelson. Just to keep us out of court there. But I mean, people can come back from the brink here. You can say apparently what you like about Trump, and then he still welcomes you with open arms.
He'd be denied he was even going to take the post, did he not?
Well, of course
and
he
then
did.
there was no
he
one
denied it. He was sitting in that seat in this studio. I was sitting in here with him, with Julia Hartley-Brewer, and Julia asked him directly, said, Lord Mandelson, will you take a role in government? He says, no, I will not take a role in government. Now, technically, this is an ambassadorial post, so it's not a government post per se, but it's pretty much the same.
Well, and he was going for Chancellor of Oxford University at the same time as well, so he was clearly hedging his bets. You know, what am I going to do
He
next?
said he could do both. He said he could do both.
I mean, that wouldn't have been... I heard him say that on a Times podcast, but that wouldn't have been credible. Being the ambassador to the United States is a pretty full-time job as far as I understand it.
And he's just got newlywed as well. Can't he just concentrate on building a home?
One thing at a time.
People like Mandelson, you know, they have such, even at the sort of back end of his career, he just has such visceral ambition. I'm not saying whether that's necessarily good. Sometimes that can be a bad thing. He just wants that status, that power, but he's good at it.
If you look at his eyes, they actually glow red.
Okay, we'll leave that perhaps in the meantime.